All right. So, in this video, I wanted to share more thoughts that I had about the Lumix 24 to 60 f2.8. I made a video in December talking about the initial impressions I have of this lens, and there's a couple of other things that I wanted to address in this video regarding this lens. I still think it was a great pickup, and the versatility of this lens is pretty obvious, being a mid-range zoom. But there's a couple of other things that I saw online that people were talking about with this specific lens. The 24 to 60 f2.8, apparently a few users or people who have purchased this lens when it was initially announced have noticed that their copies of the 24 to 60 f2.8 happen to have, maybe it's a quality control issue. I'm not 100% certain of this, but the zoom ring is really stiff on the initial copies of this lens. My copy, which we are on right now at about 60 millimeters in this shot, it doesn't have that issue. I have zoomed in and zoomed out in a couple of different scenarios, and I haven't seen this issue. Now, I did zoom in and zoom out once, and I thought that it had this issue with the focus ring, but it was actually me kind of bumping the tripod. I was at a little bit of an awkward angle. But yeah, if you're picking this up now, you shouldn't run into that issue, but I would just caution anybody who is looking to get this lens to test it out when you first pick up this, this or your copy of this lens. A couple of other things that I also wanted to mention too, the close focus distance on this lens is pretty good at both 24 millimeters and 60 millimeters. I believe they're better at 24 millimeters, obviously, but the Sigma 24 to 70 f2.8 version 2 Art Series lens, that one I believe is a better lens for close focusing distance performance. And, I wouldn't say that it's so much better, but this one compared to a lot of the other lenses does perform pretty well. And for its price point and what you're getting with this lens, I think it's solid. The other thing that I wanted to mention too with this lens, I know a lot of people in their reviews have been talking about the hybrid zoom feature where you're able to jump into APS-C mode. And I mentioned this in my last video too. Just understand, if you're not somebody who has shot with Lumix cameras before, or you're thinking of getting into the Lumix ecosystem and picking up this lens, that hybrid zoom feature, you can't use that in open gate. I think a lot of people don't really talk about that in other videos. You have to be in your standard 16:9 aspect ratio. So in 4K, you will get the hybrid zoom capability. If you drop down to 1080p, you'll actually be able to extend the reach even further. And I'll throw up a example of this in this video. And if you're able to figure out this landmark, it'll be a dead giveaway as to where I'm located. But anyway, a couple of other things that I wanted to mention too that I have noticed with this lens as well. The zoom ring is nice and smooth on my copy, like I mentioned before. The focus ring is a little bit looser than my Lumix 35mm f1.8 and my 18mm f1.8. And that's fine. It's not that big of a deal. I mean, they're focused by wire anyway, but it is just a little looser. I would have liked it to be a little bit tighter. And from what I've gathered online, a lot of other people that have picked up this lens have said that the focusing ring is a little bit looser, but it's not a big deal. This lens supposedly has some of the best autofocusing performance for Lumix full frame cameras. So if you are using an older Lumix camera, not one that has contrast detect only, but something like a Lumix S5 II, which was the first Lumix full frame camera to have phase detect autofocus, you should get really good performance with this lens on your Lumix S5 II, S5 IIX, and the Lumix S9. So yeah, I think it's a really solid pickup for anybody that is looking for a mid-range zoom, as I mentioned in my last video. And if you're also looking to get into the Lumix full frame space, this is a solid option. Now, one thing I also want to mention, and I didn't mention this in my last video, is that the Lumix 24 to 60 f2.8, well, I did mention that it does have a 77mm filter thread. But if you want a mid-range zoom and you don't really care that much for the 24mm aspect ratio, or not aspect ratio, the 24mm focal length, and you're fine with, like, you know, starting at 28mm, the Sigma 28-70 f2.8 is a good option, and you would be able to retain that 67mm filter thread across all your lenses, assuming that you use the, you know, the 18mm f1.8 or the 35mm f1.8 or the 50 or 85 or whatever. For me, that's not that big of a deal. I don't mind using 77mm on this and then 67mm on the others. You can get step-up rings for those. But just something to be aware of if you want to have all of your lenses sharing the same filter thread size. So, you know, just wanted to mention that too. Anyway, with all that being said, here's a couple of examples of the autofocus performance and the focus breathing on this lens. I think the focus breathing is very well controlled on this lens. Panasonic lenses are known to be pretty well controlled when it comes to focus breathing compared to Sony, where you have to enable a setting to control the focus breathing in camera. Panasonic obviously is really focused on video first, even though they don't really have a proper cinema camera or video camera, at least in recent years, but they seem to prioritize focus breathing. And also this lens seems to be parfocal, which I did mention in my last video, and from some other tests that I've done, it does a really good job of keeping that focus when zooming in and zooming out. At least to me it does. So your mileage may vary, but I think it's awesome. Like I said before, definitely recommend this lens in the Lumix full frame ecosystem. If you have this lens, what do you think of this lens? Do you think it was a worthwhile pickup? I know the price went up recently. It was originally $8.99 when it first came out. I got this open box, but it was still the higher price at the time. But, you know, I didn't spend the full, I think it's like $10.50 now in the US here. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far, and that's all I gotta say. Well, anyway, I will catch you guys in the next video. I really appreciate you checking this out, and as always, peace.